get started. Doesn't seem like this first image is loading, which is very strange, but it's all good. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to come join us today. It is such a pleasure to welcome you all to the second Ideas panels for today for the virtual portion of the Diversity Summit. My fellow Ideas facilitators and I are thrilled to welcome you here. And we're going to be talking about we're going to be discussing the inclusive classroom and teaching practices, some of which that we even use in our own classrooms each week. Our agenda for today is to uncover what the Ideas program is and how it fosters inclusivity at Stonehill. We're going to be getting some feedback from you all on what an inclusive classroom at Stonehill should look like. And we're going to begin a discussion on democratic education and what that looks like in each of our individual classes. Throughout our conversation today, if a question comes to mind or a comment that you'd like to say, feel free to write it down and you can share it later at our Q&A right at the end of this panel, or you could also include it in the chat. Either way is totally fine. We will address your question. And if there's anything else that you need, we are just really excited for you to be here and we're ready to get started. Oh, there's our introduction, inclusive classroom and teaching practices. Alrighty, so as stated just 1 minute ago, everyone speaking on this panel today is from the Ideas Democratic Education at Stonehill course. We're all taking a course right now, and we're also Ideas facilitators. So what even is Ideas? It stands for Integrating Democratic Education at Stonehill. And basically, it stands for an interdisciplinary, student-centered program that fosters engagement and active learning by creating an environment for students to share their passions, wisdom, and knowledge with one another through student-led courses. So, in other words, to briefly summarize, each one of us on the panel proposed a course topic that wasn't currently already available at Stonehill. We applied to this program and got accepted. And once per week, we teach between 5 to 10 students and create lesson plans that align with our course topics and objectives. In this panel, we really just want to expand upon this very simple definition of Ideas to see how each of us actively live out creating an inclusive classroom environment in each of our classrooms every single week. However, before we wanted to jump into our own stories and classes, it wouldn't be fair if we didn't provide a space for you to share your own. So what we would love is if you would kindly answer this question of what does an inclusive classroom at Stonehill look like to you? We have a QR code posted right on this slide, and if you take your phone and scan this barcode, you should be able to bring up a Padlet, which is going to let you just post really quickly on what does an inclusive classroom at Stonehill look like to you. So if you could take a minute to do that, that would be great. I'm seeing some great responses, and I'm going to go reshare that screen so far. Awesome job. If you're still finishing up those responses, no problem at all. Keep working on them. I'm going to share our little Padlet, and I would love to see what other folks have been discussing. We've seen some multi-model learning, seeing representation of different races, genders, and sexual orientations, as well as comfort. A classroom where each student can be themselves and to thrive, as well as taking into account how the subject matter may affect people from different backgrounds. Thank you all so much for taking the time to submit this Padlet, and great job. We're going to come back to our slideshow and keep moving. So for our next portion, we'll be talking about what is democratic education. We talked about the ideas class and how this is basically the foundation of what the ideas class is. The ideas program is trying to accomplish. So I would love to find out from some of our panelists and hear who they are and their classes and how democratic education is incorporated into their classes, and as well as creating an inclusive classroom environment. What does that mean to each of them?
Thank you, Lisa. I first want to introduce myself. My name is Glendy Alvarez. I'm a senior here at Stonehill College. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I study political science. Before I go in depth in talking about our course description, I want to pass it along with my co-facilitator, Nicole Buchanan.
Hi, I'm Nicole Buchanan. I'm also a senior political science major. And like Glendy said, we're co-facilitating Journeys in America.
Just a little bit about what Journeys in America is. First, I want to talk about why we decided to create this course. Nicole and I both minor in Latin American Caribbean Studies here at Stonehill. And we really wanted to spread awareness on this minor, but most importantly, spread awareness on the importance of ethnic studies at Stonehill College. And so we decided to expand and create our own course about immigrants specifically, but most importantly, the identities, the complexity of LAC identities, and how they integrate, assimilate, or resist the social, cultural, and political forces here in the United States. And this is why we decided to create this class specifically. And I'm gonna pass it on to Nicole to talk about what we have been doing within our classes throughout this whole semester.
So we really try to bring in as many topics as we can. So we've discussed colorism, the immigration system itself. We've looked at mental health. We even have a visiting graduate student out of counseling services who's going to come in and talk about mental health among DACA recipients. And so we've done things like that. This past Monday, we had a visiting guest speaker from one of our Hope community partners, Sister Anne. She gave sort of her story about how being a white woman and how she got into being an ally and how she worked towards fixing the immigration system. And so those are some of the things we've done. We try to do as many activities with the students as possible, either by engaging them in dialogue or having them present on a topic of their own interest. So it's really been great, and we've been trying to really not only express our knowledge to them, but have them I guess, contribute to the class in their own ways as well.
And going off of what Nicole just mentioned, like we talked about, we noticed like at Stonehill, we don't often get to read authors of color, authors from diverse backgrounds. We really want to make sure that when it comes to providing those readings or those resources to our students, that they are reading from that perspective specifically, and they're hearing from those stories specifically. And a lot of our students in our classes are predominantly white, right? So, and they don't get to, and also depending on their majors, like some of them are majority in business and they don't really take classes like this. And so this is something, a unique perspective on their end to just hear more about this. And going off to democratic education, we, Nicole, have a variety of meanings of what that means to us, and it's all in its different shapes and forms. But I think, at least for me, on my end, it's really ensuring that diverse perspectives are heard, and ensuring that they're viewed in a positive form, in a form of resistance instead of a damage-centered narrative. And I think that's something what we try to portray within our classes and in our activities and in our readings and with our guest speakers.
I think very similarly, I know Gandhi, we talk about this all the time about what it means to us, and we always come up with different things. But at least for mine and kind of what I've written about is I always see it as like the exchange of knowledge between individuals, and to really emphasize that this brings about social justice, change and respect and empowerment within communities. And that's kind of mainly the way that I see democratic education.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the both of you. And we so enjoyed hearing from you. Next up, got navigating US healthcare.
Hi, my name's John Carrero. I'm a senior healthcare administration major with a comm minor. I'm co-facilitating this class with Angie Barton. Unfortunately, I can't have my camera on today because I do not have a webcam on the desktop I'm using, but I'm here in spirit. And Angie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm Angie. Like John, I am also a senior healthcare administration major, with obviously a great interest in the US healthcare system and how it relates to other countries as well as different states in the United States differing against each other. So yeah, definitely got a great interest in healthcare. So that's why we chose to facilitate this class, and it's been great so far.
Thank you, Angie. So I'm just going to touch upon a little bit of what democratic education means to us. I wrote out that democratic education is the free exchange of ideas in an inclusive discussion-based environment. And we both believe that democratic education is important for students to learn and discover themselves as lifelong learners and engage in the classroom content in a way that works well for them. And so because that's how me and Angie both view democratic education, we've built our class around that idea in the theme of ideas. Obviously, our course is mainly discussion based. We start each class off by interacting with each student, asking about their week and checking in. And then we have a discussion question where we pose a question in the class about a relating topic and allow them space and time to process the question and give us a response to what their thoughts are. It's a great segue into the material from just joining us in class. And we've kind of developed an ideology of understanding of remote access for students. We're both trying to remain as flexible as possible with the changing landscape of COVID and all of the testing processes. And so in addition to that, after we teach our segments of the topics for our class, we allow space for students to process what we've told them and to ask questions. We like to welcome when students ask questions or if they have different opinions from us, because we see that as an opportunity for us to learn from them, because we are certainly not experts. This is what we find to be an important part of democratic education, since it allows us to understand the student's standpoint and for their classmates to learn from them as well. And then Angie's going to talk a little bit about some of our specific assignments where we try to foster those ideas.
Thank you, John. So yeah, going off of that, we definitely have tried and I think succeeded in creating a very inclusive classroom by allowing discussion-based learning, as well as just formulating, I guess I could say, our projects around the concepts that we'd really like to integrate in our students' learning. For example, those weekly reflections that we have had the students do, they're essentially one-page reflection papers that are due each week. And they're basically what the student uses for their discussion portion in class, which I think is a great way for them to really formulate their thoughts prior to coming to class as a homework assignment. And then they come prepared to talk and gives them an opportunity to give their opinions and their thoughts on that. Additionally, John and I have both selected projects that pertain to our great interests in learning as well. So for me, I really wanted our students to understand the disparities that exist in healthcare, either from a racial standpoint, gender standpoint, rural versus urban locations, as well as those who suffer from pre-existing conditions. Essentially, these students did research on their population group of choice and came back to the class to educate the rest of their class and John and I on the population that they did their research on. And then for John's assignment, essentially, he came up with this great idea to assign pairs of students a population identity to see based on age or pre-existing condition, whether or not they have dependents or they're a smoker, how it would affect their health insurance, their costs, and what health insurances that they are actually eligible for. And then what they're actually going to be submitting to us next week is their own health insurance plan for themselves, and they're going to plug in their own personal information and get back to us on kind of, especially for the seniors who may be graduating soon, what type of health insurance plan will work best for them. Finally, the last portion project that we will be having is the final project. We formulated this to be focused around the topic that each student found to be most interesting and are passionate about. And we've opened it up to them and asked if they feel as though there's a topic that we touched upon but did not go more in depth about, if they'd like to further research that and then come back to the class and educate us and other classmates with their research. That's really our main goal. So we're very excited to see what they do. We've left the format for the final project very flexible in the sense that they can choose to do a presentation or a paper, a movie or a cartoon, something creative, and that way they can be comfortable presenting it. So yeah, that's just a little bit of information about kind of what our class stands for and how we're trying to create a more inclusive environment in our classroom that maybe students can take from now while they go back to other classes in the future and see if professors maybe can incorporate similar ideologies with theirs.
Thank you both so much, Angie and John, for sharing specific examples within your own course where democratic education is really playing a part, and you're doing a wonderful job. So I'm excited to see what's next. Right now, we're going to be talking about women at work with, so if Julia is here, that'd be awesome.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia Foley and I am facilitating Women at Work with my sister Emily. I am a marketing major with a communication minor, and we both have very strong interest in women equality, especially in the business field. So that kind of inspired us to talk about this course with our peers. We noticed that there's a huge inequality of women and men in leadership positions, especially in business, and it's not spoken about in our business classes as we are both in the business school. So our course, Women at Work, is to educate and empower students at Stonehill about the impact of gender on leadership and workplace inequalities. And a quote that kind of sums up our core idea is "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made," by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'll just share a little bit about our classroom format. So we have really relied on open communication in the classroom. I believe it's really essential to learn from each other. So what we do is we have every class, a different student brings in a topic that relates to our course, and it's usually an article or a video, and we will watch that video or read the article together, and they will kind of explain why it's so important to them, and then it opens the floor up to everyone in the class. Also, we go around and talk about that. Some topics that we have explored this semester are the glass ceiling. We've talked about women in education, and we had a woman superintendent come in and speak with us. She's a woman in a top leadership position, obviously, in schools. We've had a woman in business. We had Professor Lopes come in and speak with us. She's a gender scholar and also a female CPA. So that was an awesome chance to hear from her and her experience. We have talked about gender leaders and leadership, of course, and explored our own leadership styles. And we have made a focus to talk about working mothers and the impact of COVID on working mothers today. That has been a huge issue that females have faced. They're actually, it's a big problem. during the COVID pandemic. So we made a focus to talk about that. We've talked a lot about women mentoring and negotiation, as that's very important. And me and Emily found that that is like a topic we wanted to focus on this semester, since we do not talk about that in the business school, and it's essential pretty much in all areas of the workforce. And going forward, we'll be talking about creating a safe space for women in the workforce and other minority groups as well. Democratic education, I can just talk a little bit what that means to me. Democratic education grants freedom to a student and allows individuals to take charge of their learning. I believe that democratic education has a classroom culture that's very accepting, open to new ideas and conversations, and has a feel for equality. And when I say that, I mean equality between like facilitators, so me and Emily and our peers that are in our course, but also in like a regular classroom as well with the professors. I think when there's equality, people are more likely to learn from each other and speak up about issues that they find and are passionate about. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so sorry, Julia. Next up, we've got SNL in politics.
Hello, my name is Hannah Lennon, she, her, hers. I'm a junior communications major and I double minor in creative writing and journalism. And I'm teaching SNL in politics. So I hope you've all seen Saturday Night Live, or at least know what it is. Otherwise, you might be a little confused. So my course is really about studying the intersection between political satire and American politics. Through the years, SNL has been on since 1975, and ever since their first or second episode, they've made a commentary on politics, whether that be through the Weekend Update, which is kind of like their news session kind of spoof, or just through a regular political skit, like their Cold Open, which is the first skit of the night. They make a point to talk about politics and provide a criticism to the leaders of this country. And in my classroom, I like to keep things discussion-based and very open for all opinions. We start out every single class by watching a clip from the previous week's episode of Saturday Night Live, just to keep things current. And we say our reactions, what we kind of noticed about the comedy of it all, but also the commentary. And we really like to bring it into the currency of everything that's happening right now. And we let people speak on their own opinions of everything. And then I kind of open it up to see if anyone else wants to speak on anything that has happened recently, or if they've noticed anything in the news, because this is a class about pop culture, but it's also about that intersection with politics. So I think that was really important. For example, the other week we had a really good half-hour discussion that was not planned about something Trevor Noah, who, if you don't know, he's the host of The Daily Show, something that Trevor Noah said about the shooting that had happened in Atlanta a few weeks ago. And it was really important to take a moment and discuss it and kind of the outcomes of it and political satire's role in that. So political satire, you might think, is just a joke to some people. Some people watch SNL mainly for entertainment, or it's just something that's on super late at night, like you watch it when you're trying to go to sleep. But it can also be something that really matters. We looked at in class last week, there's a Pew Research study. It's a few years old, but there's a Pew Research study that found that 10% of viewers from the Colbert Report, which used to be Stephen Colbert's show, they actually watched it, and that's how they got their news. So political satire isn't just not for everyone. It's not just something that's entertainment. It's not just funny. It matters, and it can educate people, and it can influence people. And we also go on to talk about the influence that it has over politics. The past few years, you've probably heard about President Trump tweeting about Alec Baldwin's impression of him, threatening to sue SNL, and other things like that. So we talk about the kind of reaction that political satire can stir up. So our discussions are they're kind of just say whatever comes to mind. And we kind of base it off of everything that's like, sorry, my mind's going a million miles an hour. We're kind of just like making sure everything is covered. We try to touch all bases, like political satire can really reach everything because it's a matter of free speech. That's where I was going with it. I found my thought. Discussions about political satire often lead to discussions about free speech because when politicians are criticized by comedians, they often try to fight back. There's comedians from Egypt and Myanmar who don't even live in their countries anymore because they have been persecuted by their leaders for criticizing the government. So even though the topic and the general tone of my class is fun, we really dive deeper into those really important discussions on free speech. So democratic education, it means to me that it can be anything. So in my classroom, I like to make sure that there's an equality between the students and peers. I want to make sure that our discussions are open and including everyone, no matter your political party, your personal values. But it's also a point that recently in politics, the things that people have been debating, I made it a point that human rights are not up for debate in my classroom. So we try to keep everything inclusive and looking at everyone's different political values while still having a really great discussion about the intersections that happen between entertainment and politics. Democratic education to me is kind of making sure that everyone's voice is heard, no matter if you're the kid in the class like I was freshman year who kind of didn't have anything to say. I want to make sure that you're having your voice heard, whether that be in our actual classroom discussion or emailing me or our discussion boards, and making sure that I hear what you have to say. So that was a long tangent, but we got there in the end.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And next up, we've got Drag, Rise, and Resistance. Matt.
Hi, my name is Matt Murray. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the class of 2022. I am an English and American Studies double major with a double minor in creative writing and digital humanities. So every humanities thing you can think of. I am co-facilitating the class Drag, Rise, and Resistance with Maddie Pimentel, and our class is about the rise of drag culture into the mainstream through popular television shows such as RuPaul's Drag Race, and how that has impacted the public perception of drag in America. So what I have written down on the slide is that our course explores the rise of drag culture in America, the intersectionality of drag, and the representation or lack of representation of drag in relatively mainstream media. So our class has been structured chronologically. We started with watching some documentaries about drag pageants in like the 60s, and then we went to ballroom culture in the 80s in New York, and watched shows such as Pose, and discussed the impact of ballroom culture and how the underground culture of voguing or ballroom categories and walking categories has helped shape drag and drag culture into what it is today, and how the impact of those things have helped create the television show RuPaul's Drag Race and other reality competition shows. The core of the class is discussing RuPaul's Drag Race and shows such as Drag Race and the representation that they have on drag and what drag really means. Because these shows do show just one specific type of drag, and it gives the general audience and the broader audience of television watchers a specific image in their mind of what drag means. So our course explores that and explores the ideas of what are the benefits of having a show like RuPaul's Drag Race be popularized, and what are the downsides of having a show like that be popularized. We also look at the show, the Boulet Brothers Dragula, which is the last image up there. That's another reality competition show for drag performers, but they have included drag kings, they've included non-binary performers, and drag artists that don't necessarily define themselves as a drag queen or drag king in like the standard sense. So our course really wants to explore the definition of drag and what drag really means, because when you hear the word drag, usually your first mind goes to, oh, RuPaul, or a man dressing up as a woman and performing or lip syncing a song. And that not necessarily encompasses all of what drag really means to the queer community and to this community that not many people are fully aware of. And last third of the course, we're discussing the intersectionality of drag, and especially on television shows such as RuPaul's Drag Race, how these shows don't necessarily push forward narratives that are uncomfortable to a straight cisgendered audience. A lot of drag culture comes from Black trans women, and that has been overlooked severely in recent years because of the popularization of Drag Race and how many audience members of the show, or many viewers, really cling on to this like skinny white queens or the cisgendered gay men who look like beautiful women in drag. So the show has tailored itself over the years to appeal to the broader audience, which detracts from the core of what drag is and the self-expression that drag gives to queer people in general, people of color, and anyone who doesn't fall under the cisgender umbrella. So we really wanted to dive into that and have those discussions on how can you have racism in a show when there are Black people on it. How can you have transphobia within the queer community? Like, how is that possible? Because a lot of these discussions aren't being had, and a lot of these things are not really shown to people who have not dived deep into LGBTQ culture. So what we wanted to do with our class is to have a course on this campus that really allows students to explore a community that they are fully just not necessarily aware of, and giving them the opportunity to look at the queer community in a different light, see the issues within and outside of the community, and discuss at its core what drag means to queer people, and how reality competition shows can both be a huge benefit and also a detriment to the community. So we've had a lot of activities that have helped facilitate an inclusive classroom and inclusive teaching practices. Half of every class that we have is dedicated to discussion. We have discussion leaders who volunteered for the weeks they wanted to discuss. We usually view a piece of media the week before. They come up with their own questions. We have the students answer those questions on the discussion boards, and then we come to class and go right into it. And they discuss what they wrote, what they found, what they liked, what they didn't like, and new things that they discovered. And I think it's really important to dedicate so much time to discussion, because it allows us as the facilitators to understand, okay, they're very interested in this aspect, or like they picked out this one line from this episode. Why was this the line that they wanted to focus on? Why is this something that interested them the most? And especially coming from our perspectives, like Maddie and I, we've seen a lot of this media before. We understand more of the background. So it was very interesting and eye-opening to see what interested our students. And I think something that we also did successfully with these discussions is that we focused on uplifting the voices of people who have not been heard. Our class is completely made up of white students, cisgendered female students, I'm the only male in the classroom setting. So we have made sure within our curriculum and within the way that we conduct class to make sure that we are not talking over voices, we are not overlooking voices. We are trying to make sure that everyone is heard in the classroom from their own personal experiences, and then also the people who we are talking about, the Black trans women of the ballroom scene, or the non-binary performers on different reality competition shows. We're making sure we're including as many voices as we can that are not the same as ours, so that we can get a full experience as much as we can as a predominantly white classroom, female centric, at Stonehill College. So I think at its core, our class is really about having discussions and including voices that have not been included for a long time, because yes, Stonehill does have like gender classes, they have LGBTQ courses, but not nearly as much as I believe they should. And I think that's why Maddie and I decided to have this class, because it's a huge aspect of the queer community that not many people are aware of. So the definition of democratic education that I wrote out for us is that democratic education allows us to explore subjects that are otherwise overlooked and discuss them in an educational environment to further enrich passion and growth within students. And I think what our main goal is as facilitators is to enrich passion for this community that people are unaware of, and to allow us to listen to voices that have not been heard, and look at it in an educational setting, because it really helps foster a better appreciation, a better understanding, and just a overall, you get a better look at this entire community and this entire group of people who are not even really being perceived now in the way that they could be, with the rise of RuPaul's Drag Race. Like, that does not show or encompass what drag is. So yeah, I guess our course is just to facilitate passion within students, to allow people to discuss something that they love, but also for them to learn more about something that is not necessarily talked about in an educational setting, at least here at Stonehill, and just to boost those voices that are a lot of times overlooked. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I have no doubt that you are igniting that passion, just as you said. It's taking a minute to load. Let's see. Just gonna exit out real fast and see who's next. I apologize for the wait. The next person to go is me, so I can honestly just get right on started, and once it loads, just pull it back up. But this semester, so hello, my name is Louisa Russell. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a current senior double majoring with education studies and environmental studies. This semester, I am facilitating a course called Growing Green Faith. And in this course, my students and I are diving into a wide array of different religions, faith traditions, and spiritual practices around the world. And just the goal is to assist people in really reconnecting with the earth. My slideshow did come back up, so I'm going to just play from current slide. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. Oh. Okay. So just to pick back on up, basically various green faith practices from around the world that help people to kind of fall back in love with the earth and really redefine what it means to be a human being, and kind of creating that reciprocal relationship with the plants and animals and land around us. So we, throughout this course, participate in various stargazing meditations, listen to songs that promote empathy and care for the earth, and we pick up trash and go on walks around campus, and basically just find various ways to kind of take these lessons and apply them in real ways, even through, we go to a garden bed near the senior courts and actually like weed and practice like caring for that little mini environment. So what, like by the end of this class, my students will walk away with not only a deeper care and love for the earth, but also my goal is for them to almost develop their own great faith. How do they want to lead and walk around in creating this space of like kindness towards the earth and towards other people as well. So what does inclusivity look like for me and my classroom? For starters, the very foundation of this course is built upon the celebration of diversity, of biodiversity, and the beauty and wonder of the gifts of each different season. So like, for example, when I was planning out this course, I knew that in the very beginning, it was going to be darker later. So we went on lots of stargazing meditations and did more things kind of also inside too, because I knew it's gonna be a little bit colder and darker. But then towards the end, we've been going to the caves one week and learning about not only the history of the land at Stonehill. A lot of what we know is the Ames family. What about the Wampanoags tribes who have lived here for far longer, who a lot of times aren't really included in the curriculum at Stonehill. So making way for hearing different videos and different stories about who was here long before the Ames family. And then also in our own classroom, each week my students bring in a song and a meditation. So, or they could also choose a poem or a prayer that really like calls to them. And what is great is when I did like my example is I wanted to make sure that when they're choosing their song and their poem, you can obviously choose anyone, but really be conscious of who you're selecting. Try and expand like beyond your palette, like maybe even beyond the United States and voices that you commonly hear on a daily basis, like actually expand beyond that and really see who else is out there. So it's been really cool to see. We've had artists and various poets from South America, from the South Pacific. It's been really neat to see how folks are really taking this seriously and making sure that our voices are not the only ones being heard, as well as American voices as well, like just really expanding beyond that narrative. So for me, in terms of democratic education and kind of how I try and live that out each class and each lesson plan as well, I try and have multiple different means for students to learn. So all the way back in the beginning of the semester, I put out a survey asking students, how do you learn best? But then also, how do you express your knowledge to the best of your ability? And I got a slew of different responses back, ranging from, I learn best by doing, I learn best by speaking with others. And so basically I used my students' feedback to guide my course and made sure that every single class, there was an opportunity for students to speak, an opportunity for students to sit and write, for students who like really express that that's how they learn best and process best. Also, with every question that I ask students, I make sure that I give them at least 1 to 2 minutes to just kind of sit there and like journal or draw or do what they need to do to process that information. So it's a little bit less scary when they're sharing to the full group, because there is 9 students in the class. So I want to make sure that they have that safe space and like kind of the knowledge that they, like the confidence to be able to share. And then in terms of like activities and like just using that survey to make sure that to hold myself accountable. So I not only sent that survey in the beginning of the semester, but in the middle as well, to say, hey, am I actually doing a good job of, do you feel like this is a solid example of a classroom that's living out democratic education? Do you feel supported? And like also making sure that for students, as they approach their final projects, have the support that they need. So scheduling one-on-one meetings with each and every one of my students because that has always helped me with when past professors have put that option out there. So just making sure that they have the support and as well as like the ability to own how they learn best and actively live that out in my class. So these were just a few suggestions that I personally use to try and incorporate in democratic education and my definition of it, which is to make sure that there's multiple means of learning and expressing student knowledge. So thank you. I think we've got one more person right after I go. Next up, we've got exploring money and power, and that's going to be with JC.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Thanks again for coming to our presentation. I know this year is not ideal being on Zoom, but for those who are able to show up today, so we really appreciate it for staying for an hour or so of this session. But yeah, like Louisa said, thank you. My name is JC. I'm a senior accounting major, communication minor. So just a little bit about my course. So Exploring Money and Power is a course that I co-facilitate with Mary, who's a senior as well, and Chris, who's also a senior, all accounting majors as well. So real quick, one of the reasons why we decided to teach this class this semester was because of just in general how like with financial literacy lacks in our education system, like through high school, in college. It's one of those things that are not talked about. So, when we came together to plan for this course, we wanted to provide information to our peers, especially for those seniors that are leaving college without having any knowledge about, the basic financial literacy, the budgeting and investments. So what this course did was allowed those students to think about their future. And so this course covers personal finance, investments, and we also talk about cryptocurrency, which is actually the hottest topic right now with technology being part of our life. So what democratic education means to us, obviously, like most of my peers mentioned, it means a lot for each person, and which is okay. And so what we try to do with our class is we allowed the students um, to express their opinions and what they know about, financial literacy or investments. We didn't have any requirements. You don't have to be, because I know most of our courses that are taught here in business at Stonehill, you kind of have to have some prerequisite experience or knowledge about the class. But with this class, it was more open. It didn't matter how much you knew about investments. It didn't matter how much experience you had. So some of the conversation that we had, we allowed students to just talk about from their perspective, from their standpoint, what they know about it. And then that allowed us to like fill in some of the missing gaps. So we were fortunate enough to have the students in person, but in terms of how we went about the whole classes, we had some conversation, discussion based, mixed with lectures. And another thing that we did in the beginning of the class is that we would allow students to talk about any current events that's going on in the business world. It could be like, about a stock market. It could be about, any news that affects the business world, and also, financially. And then especially now being in a pandemic, we hear a lot of, the stimulus check that the federal government is passing on. So those were discussions that students would bring to class and talk about, like, what does that mean? Who qualifies for the stimulus check? Who's eligible for that? So we're able to provide that. And also we made it clear from the beginning of the course that this class, even though Chris, Mary, and I are co-facilitating this class, but they can also teach us just as much as we're teaching them. So it went both ways. It wasn't just us, running things, but they also contributed to the class. I don't think this class would have went as far as, gotten now if it wasn't for their contribution. And I think that's the whole idea of democratic education, is empowering your students to not only participate for like predetermined subjects, but also allow them to contribute on topics that are being discussed in the course. And that's what we try to do. And I hope that this is something that other faculty members here at Stonehill will consider moving forward. And I think you notice the difference between how they listen and the things they're learning compared to like our normal classes that we have, where mostly just professor teaching and kind of the topic that they have designed and the curriculum they have designed, and they can't really change it or like try to incorporate our ideas in. But this class allows us to all of us to learn, not just our students but also as well as the facilitators as well. So but yeah, so I'm hoping that this whole presentation kind of helped everybody, think about where they're teaching it, and also just inspire other faculty members and inspiring to continue to teach, just the ways to improve, and how to get the students involved, and any student involved in what they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Awesome job. So I'm conscious of our 5 minutes remaining, and just to wrap everything up and also allow you time to any of our participants to share a comment or a question that they had, just to wrap things up. Our Stonehill College's, our mission of our college is to educate the whole person, and to make sure they can think, act, and lead with courage, to create in the creation of a more just and compassionate world. So having this definition in mind with our mission statement, we had just a few questions, and anyone is welcome to think about this, answer it, and you can even just think about this far beyond the time of our presentation. But what barriers do you think are prohibiting other Stonehill classes from being like ideas classes? And why is creating an inclusive classroom environment important? So as of now, I'm just going to, all we have is just our questions and comments for us. So I think I'm going to stop the share and allow you to kind of ask anything that you would like to. I can put these questions in the chat as well, in case you had a thought to share, but the floor is yours.
I speak to the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for adding in. Yeah.
So I think in some other classes, I know that some of my classes have been like this, where it's very much a conversation. But I think in some other classes, the instructor, I get the sense that yes, they know what they're doing and they're the instructor, but it seems more like they're approaching the class, I know nothing, and they're just naive and completely unaware of the topic, and they have nothing to contribute in terms of knowledge or insight in the topic, and that might be what is hindering some of these other classes from being more like ideas classes.
Yeah, I really appreciate you like sharing that perspective, and so many aspects of what you shared echo in like my own thoughts. So if anyone else, I put those 2 questions in the chat. So if anyone else had something to share, go for it. Oh, I see.
That's me. Yeah.
Hello.
Hey. So I hate to be this might feel a little bit like a cop out, but I guess I'm wondering from the panel, what do you think are the obstacles? What do you think are the impediments? And maybe you answered some of that sort of reverse engineered in your own definitions of democratic education, but I'd love to hear kind of what you think are some things that are standing in the way.
I can try to answer that. And then again, I can't speak for everyone in the panel, but from my perspective, I feel like a lot of it has to do with tradition. You know, it's easy to stick to the traditional way of teaching, and for a lot of professors. And again, it's not that no one wants to change. It's that a lot of professors are comfortable sticking to the way they've been doing for 16 years, 20 years, however long they've been teaching, and it works for them. But then I think what ends up missing is that, well, it works for you and it's successful for you, but it may not be successful for the students. And I think what I noticed, especially as in a business major here, what I noticed is that students are going to do well um, regardless what ways that you teach or style that you teach. A student's going to go ahead. I think students do well. All of them are smart. I think they're still going to do well. They're still going to turn in the assignments, get the A's, get the grades that they want. But at the end of the day, is that in terms of learning, actually grasping the material and putting to practice, that's where I think it lacks, because a lot of us end up doing things just because we have to. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go to class just because I have to, and spend the whole hour listening to a professor lecturing, and then do the assignment, turn and move on. And that happens from like middle school to college. And a lot of us, what ends up happening, we tend to take the classes that were more effective um, later on after college. But the things that we kind of, going through emotions, I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not going to remember most of it. It's mostly just, get the grade and move on. But I feel like for professors, in order for them to be effective, and if you want the material to be um, attained later on, even after college, you need to switch up some styles, have a conversation. And I think too, with the feedback that we got from our students, is that most of them are business majors and some science majors. They were saying that, more of conversational and discussion and less of the tedious schoolwork allows them to reflect on what they're actually learning and also put it into practice. Where when the time is spent on like doing the work and the assignment, you're just doing it just to get it done rather than just attaining the information. So that's the way I see it. It's easy for professors to stick to their traditional way of doing things. And again, it's gonna take a while for those professors to change. But I think the whole idea is that moving forward, like how do you make sure that some professors are able to do that, and others it's harder. And I think that's another challenge that the college and the education system is struggling with, is how do we make sure that the change is somewhat smooth for everyone. And I think that having these conversations and having these sessions, it allows them to get feedback from the students. I don't know if that answered your question, but anyone else can touch on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something that definitely resonates with me. I think it can become very easy, or people are very busy, and so you sort of have some defaults. And I definitely think that it took me a few years to feel like I could be more experimental and willing to sort of say, like, this might fail, just say it outright to my students. We're going to try something here, it might not work. But I think that can take a certain degree of willingness to attempt that, right? And that's often not there.
Go for it, Sarah.
Like, I'm not really on the panel, but going off of what JC and then Sarah said, I feel like there's also a lot of pressure on professors and teachers K through 12 too, because they're being evaluated by, like, whether it's a board of education or a provost, by like student evaluations and student performance, by their like final grades at the end of the class. And I feel like to an extent, it's almost safer for them to just stick with what they've been doing because they know what to expect. Whereas if they change it up and start going more discussion based or more student led, or like change the balance of power, or start like relying on student feedback more, then they're kind of like risking, I don't know if risking is the right word, but it's not as safe and comfortable and they don't know what to expect. So yeah, I think that also contributes.
Yes, Professor Go, we'd love to hear from you.
I just want to ask one more question to the panel. So I really appreciate you doing this presentation. It was really exciting to see what you guys have been doing over the semester. I wish I took some of your classes too. So you talk a lot about inclusive learning environments. So I was just wondering, like, what's your approach to equitable learning environment? Because every student come to classroom with different levels of privilege, right? So I just wondering, like, what's your thoughts after reading these ideas classes this semester? How to make learning environment more equitable.
I can speak on that for a little bit, if that's okay. I'm cognizant of time, but I know that with our class going into it, we knew that some people had a lot more background on our topic than others. Some people came in with absolutely no idea, and others were like, yeah, I know everything I need to know. And I think that something that we did approaching the class, knowing that we were going to have people with varying degrees of knowledge, was to start out by asking, okay, like, what are your perceptions of drag? I'm going to use my class as the example, but like, what are your perceptions of this? Like, when you hear these terms, what do you think? And we also started out with like baseline activities of like, these are terms that you might not know. Some of you definitely do know, some of you don't. And just sort of starting the class out at one level, even though we knew that there were varying levels within the classroom of knowledge, like prior knowledge. And I think something that we really wanted to establish was, even if you know more about this, like maybe you've seen every episode of Drag Race, even if you like have seen all of these documentaries before, what we wanted to do in our classroom setting was facilitate a conversation and have people be open to listening and learning from other experiences, and other like perspectives, people who have never encountered it, people who have encountered it a little bit. And I think for us, it was just setting the bar and making sure that everyone was aware that, okay, there are some people that may know more, but if they're speaking, they're not like showing off that they know more. They're just talking from their perspective, and your perspective is different. Like you might not have seen as much content as they have. You might not have the same definition that they do, but that doesn't mean that your perspective is any less valued in this setting. So at least for us, it was setting that expectation right away of understanding that there are varying degrees of where people are coming from, and just acknowledging it, making it clear that we know and like we understand, and we want to set that expectation of everyone's opinions are valid, everyone's comments and ideas should be able to be discussed. So yeah.
All right, I apologize to have to kind of put a halt to our conversation. Thank you all for being here so much. And it was such a privilege to be with all of you today. So thank you for coming. And I hope you gained something from our presentation, and just, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the Diversity Summit and rest of the weekend as well. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job, everyone.
Thank you.